Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. My next guest, Gary Pacelli, amazing man. He was a Marine, he was a motorcycle cop, he was a DEA agent who literally at one point was stopped someone on the side of the road and they grabbed his arm and locked arms with him and took off down the road. Really interesting stories. He jumped out of an airplane and broke his neck at 5,000 feet. Guys, you've got to watch this. Please enjoy. Hey, everybody, Kara here, and I am jumping on with one of my favorite people who also happens to be my co director of the Life and Transformational Division of the Coaching Nexus, Dr. Ron Stotts.
Hey, everybody. If you ever felt stuck, even though you know you're capable of more, this next part's for you.
We're going to be co teaching a free Zoom class on July 2nd called What's Really Holding You Back? Spoiler alert, it's not lack of discipline or a broken to-do list.
No, actually, it's usually something happening under the surface, really something in your subconscious that's running the show. Of course, until you notice it.
This class is going to help you spot patterns that keep tripping you up, and more importantly, how to stop letting them sabotage your success.
Yeah, and, don't worry, we're not going to talk at you or feel like you're broken. We've certainly both faced our own inner saboteurs. Let's just say it's more about sharing some wisdom and laughter.
So if you're ready to understand what's really keeping you stuck and know how to shift it, we'd love to have you join us.
Totally free. Just click on the link in the show notes or scan the QR code to grab your spot.
You'll leave a lot lighter, clearer, and more in control of your own story.
We'll see you there.
Gary, welcome to Think Your Way to an Epic Life.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, your story, dude, has moved me beyond, and I have a billion questions for you. We are going to have a great time. So let's start out. You were in law enforcement. Can you tell me a little bit about that job?
Yeah, I started in this county jail, and I just got out of the Marine Corps, and I got hired to work in a jail. So I worked. I eventually got on the road. I was a motorcycle cop for about 10 years, and then I became a detective. And I was assigned to a special narcotics unit. We were assigned to the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we were doing this high level cartel level money laundering and narcotics. And I loved it.
Okay, hold on. You went too fast there. So you were with the DEA, and what was your title there?
I was a task force officer.
Okay.
So I was a detective. But the way they work it is they're special agents. And, when people from police departments get assigned to them, we actually get attached to them. We don't go to our department no more. We work right out of their headquarters. And our title's task force officer. And we have the full credentials, top secret clearance, everything,
Ooh, we could probably
I
do
was
10
extremely
podcasts.
lucky. What's that?
I said we could probably do 10 podcasts just on your time in the DEA.
Oh yeah. It was so much fun, and we were young, obviously younger than I am now, and we had very little supervision, but we were so excited about the job that we didn't need any really, So it was like playing cops and robbers for real, it was great.
At a very high level, yeah. Okay, cool. So
And,
you're doing your job, you're undercover, you don't normally ever pull anybody over, but you saw a car that was stolen. So take the story from there.
Oh, so what happened was it wasn't even stolen. So we were on surveillance because we had an informant. So we were following someone up who was from Virginia. He was up here to pick up a load of cocaine from New York. So we knew that he had his hotel room until Monday. This was a Friday. So we knew that he wasn't going to do anything until, Monday morning or very late Sunday night, because, he's with his girlfriend. There's no way he's going to get, 30 kilos of cocaine and put it in his hotel room. He's going to grab that and he's going to run right down the turnpike as fast as he could, because he doesn't want to get robbed, So, so we were kind of like taking it easy. It's the summertime, it's a Friday in the summer, we used to call them Federal Fridays, it was much more relaxed, So, and the whole tone, the whole mood was like, we were trying to convince our sergeant into, hey, let's break off early and, head out of here, Yeah, one more hour. So the mood all changed though, you know, and I'm very susceptible to that stuff, you know, like you know, like we all get it, everybody does, but you know, cops I think get it a little more, you know, that spidey sense where the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you just know something's wrong, you know. And you know, I didn't learn, I didn't know to listen to it back then, obviously, because you know, you're like, that's just fear, you know, I'm being a coward, you know. So you just ignore it, right? But it was strong, man. And it was like, you know, something was wrong. I knew it, I felt it. And you know, my lieutenant used to always keep me close to him because he used to say my antennas would go out, you know, longer than everybody else's, right? So he used to like me being around. So, you know, I knew something was up, and we had 10 guys on surveillance too. So we had way too many guys on surveillance for this, you know, because it starts to look like a funeral procession, right? Or a parade. You know, you're following this guy around, you know, and if the guy's any good, he's gonna catch on to you, you know. So we had too many guys, and you guys weren't paying attention. It was just a mess, but it was a typical Friday. So we're following this guy around New York, bodega to bodega. He's not really doing anything. He's talking on the phone. Um, so my sergeant gets on the radio and he says, all right, listen, whoever, we call it having the eye, right? Whoever has the target in sight and is the, you know, we say, all right, you know, I have the eye. Okay. So he says, whoever has the eye, if the target goes back to New Jersey and he makes the U-turn before his hotel room, pull him over and ID him, right? So I'm like, whoa, you know, I'm thinking like this is crazy. And I know everybody else in the group was thinking the same thing. I was very close with my sergeant, so called him up on the phone. And I'm like, hey, Kevin, what are we doing? You know, like what? We don't do stops like that. It's so dangerous. You know, I was dressed in shorts with a sleeveless T-shirt. You know, baseball hat. You know what I mean? Like everybody else, some guys had sandals on. You know, like because we're supposed to not even be seen. You know, and if we have to get out and follow somebody on foot, we have to blend in. You know, so you know, you're not dressed for it. And the other thing too is like, if the guy's any good, he's going to wonder why an undercover detective is pulling him over, right? It's if it, you know, a good drug dealer is going to be like, something's up. I'm not picking up this load of coke. I'm out of here, right? And then the third reason is like he could panic. He could think, oh man, the jig's up. Everybody's getting arrested, you know, and so we don't do it really. So I said, Kevin, why are we doing this? Like, well, you know, the supervisor who wasn't even there. The supervisor was in, you know, maybe 40, 50 miles away in a high rise in North New Jersey and listening to the radio, right? So he just wanted to be relevant, I think, you know. So he's like, you know, so we got to do it because normally we would call the local police department and say, hey, look, we need you to pull this car over and just ID him and no problem. But, you know, Fort Lee is a very busy police department. It's the last town before New York City, before the George Washington Bridge. So they were busy, so they can't make the stop. So we have to do it now, right? And so it just so happened that as he came back to New Jersey, there was traffic on a bridge. I don't know if you've ever been on the George Washington Bridge where there's maybe like 6 lanes merging into 2, right? And you know, you got upper level, lower level. It's a nightmare. It's always a nightmare. But this time there was traffic and construction on the bridge. Makes it even 10 times worse. So as we're crossing the bridge, all the units got scattered, you know, separated. And when we got into Jersey, I was the only car on the target, right? So I had the eye, right? So sure enough, he crosses and he makes a U-turn. Now I know I got to pull him over because he's going to get back on the highway and pull into his hotel. So I'm in an undercover car. We're on we made a U-turn. We're on the on-ramp coming to the highway. I put my emergency lights on, you know, they're hidden in the car, and I give it a little chirp of my siren, and the guy pulls over. Now he's on the highway now, pulls over to the shoulder. Okay. I get out of the car, I take my badge out from underneath, you know, so it's hanging. I at least have something, right? And now I'm going to tell him that, you know, it's you know, hey, we have a report of a stolen car. You know, it matched the description. I can see it's not you. So, I just let me see your driver's license and I'll send you on your way. No big deal, right? That's what I was going to say to him. Write down his name. Didn't get that far. So he hands me his driver's license with his right hand. So he reaches across his body, right? And now I make a rookie move, right? Because maybe I'm placing, it's Friday, who knows, right? As I go to grab it, he brings it in. I reach into the car, which is a big mistake, right? You never reach into a car. But as I reached in, I looked and I saw that his foot was on a brake. And I looked and the car was still in drive. And as soon as our eyes met, he punched the gas and he hooked my arm with his left arm. He just hooked me, right? So now I'm trying to run to keep up because he's going into the highway, right? Right on Route 4. And I know that I can't keep running and keep up with him. And I'm at the point where I'm running that if I pulled my arm out, which I could probably do at this point, I'm going to fall. And if I fall, I'm going to get run over by his back tires. So I don't know. It made sense to me at the time. I jumped into the car. I dove into the window, right? So now I'm in the car on this guy's lap, like looking at him with my legs dangling out the window, right? I look over out the window. He's already into the middle lane and he's going into the fast lane. So I know that he's going to crush me against the divider. It's like, crush me, throw me out of the car, keep going. And I just hear in my head, right, this loud, like a roar, shoot him now, bang. I hear the bang, and next thing I know, I'm just tumbling down the fast lane of the highway, just going, right? And, when stuff like that happens, time is weird in your mind. Time slows down, right? Everything slows down, even though it's going really fast. And I remember thinking, am I ever going to stop? Because it's just going on and on and on. Now it's not really going, but that's how it feels, right? And I finally come to a stop, and I'm on my hands and knees, and I still have my weapon in my hand. And I look up, and there's a tractor trailer in a fast lane, and it's right there, And again, like that slow time, right? And I have enough time in my mind. I think, like, what's next? Like an anvil gonna fall out of the sky, like a cartoon almost. You know what I mean? Like I didn't even think to move. That's how close it was. And I get yanked out of the way. My partner had showed up, right? Now he showed up just when the guy was taking off into the highway. I didn't know, right? So he heard the gunshot, but he didn't know if I got shot or if I shot. He didn't know anything. But he yanked me out of the way, and a truck goes right by, right? And he drags me to the shoulder. And he's like, are you all right? And I'm so mad, right? And I just say to him, like, go get that, the word, right? And so he jumps in his truck. He had a Ford Explorer at the time. He jumped in his truck and he takes off after the guy. So I get up, and I mean, I'm a mess, right? I'm bleeding. I've got road rash all over me, right? I have a concussion. I'm limping, right? But I'm so mad. It doesn't faze me at all. I just got like tunnel vision now. I'm going to my car, because I gotta get on this pursuit with Big Lenny, my partner, right? So I'm walking up the shoulder, and again, I'm limping, right? My badge had gotten ripped off me, right? So I don't realize that other members of the group had showed up, and they stopped traffic because it's a crime scene now. So traffic stopped, and they're trying to, get everything under control. And I'm walking up the shoulder, and I don't realize, I'm just tunnel vision, I'm in my car. I get to my car. It's like maybe 40 or 50 yards up, right? And I get close to my car, and I still have my gun in my hand too, because I'm just in a zone right now. And I get close to my car, and I say really, really pretty loud, like, I'm gonna kill that mother. You know what I mean? Like I was just, I don't know if you could ever be that mad. Like if somebody tries to kill you, you're mad. And Yeah, I know maybe people say, well, that's unprofessional. Okay, well, you know what? When you after you're shooting, you can do it your way, So, um, but at that moment I looked and I realized all the cars are stopped, right? And I look at the car; it's got to be 2 feet next to me, and there's a typical family in the car, right? Is a father, a mother, there's 2 kids in the back seat, right? And I lock eyes with the mother, and she's terrified, right? Her eyes are like, and then I realize I still have my gun in my hand. She has no idea who I am. She sees some bald maniac walking up the street, cursing and talking to himself. You know what I mean? So I quickly holster my weapon, and I get in my car, and I just, you know, I have a very strange sense of humor, and I found that just really funny, So I kind of started laughing, but I took off. So I tried to get on this pursuit, but I'm like laughing. And so I go upper level of the bridge. I had no idea that they went lower level, right? I'm not listening to the radio, and everybody's talking, and it's crazy, right? And so I didn't hear any of it. I went upper level of the bridge. They had gone lower level, and it's probably a good thing, because it really, like, um, and I was really hurt, but the adrenaline, it's a crazy ride, and I'm just mad though, like how could I have missed this guy, right? And I'm just thinking like, man, I'm never going to hear the end of it. This is what I'm thinking, right? Like, because I'm not thinking clearly, right? And so what had happened though was I didn't miss him, right? So Big Lenny had chased him, and another member of our group had jumped on the pursuit, and they got him right by the lower level where the tolls are, and they had to ram him. He wouldn't stop, so they rammed him. So now they're yelling, "Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" And I didn't see this, but this is what they told me. They told me that they couldn't see in the car because the windows were all covered with blood, right? So they couldn't see in the car, and the car, the driver's side door opens and then closes, opens and then closes, and they're like, they don't know what's going on. They're like, you know what? If that happens again, they're going to end up firing into that car because they don't know what he's doing. Like, is he got a weapon? What's going on? It opens again, and he slumps out. What had happened was he had lost so much blood, he couldn't undo his seatbelt. So, good thing that, you know what I mean? Like, they gave it enough time, right? So he slumps out, and they, wow, so he like fix him up, stop the bleeding. They saved his life. And and me, I'm driving down the Henry Hudson Parkway, and I'm just like, where is everybody? So I get a phone call on my phone, and it's my chief. We had a really great chief, right? He was a retired New York City lieutenant, and he had worked with my sheriff together. And when they both retired, one ran for sheriff, became sheriff, and the other one got hired as chief, head of narcotics. So he was he was always around whenever we were working. So if anything ever happened, he was there to help us. Like, he was great. And so he's like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Chief, I don't know. I really don't know. I'm on the Henry Hudson Parkway." He's like, "All right, well, you need to come back." I said, "Okay." I said, "But I'm trying to find Lenny." He's like, "No, Lenny's back here already." I'm like, "Well, what about the guy?" He's like, "We got him. We got the guy." I said, "Okay." I'm like, "Is the guy alive?" He's like, "Yeah, the guy's alive. Just come back." Okay. So I get back to the scene, and I park my car. My chief's there, the sheriff's there. Because what happens is when something like that happens, right? My partner Lenny, when he jumped in his car, he called a 1013 with an officer down, right? 1013 was our code for, like, the worst thing that could possibly ever happen. It could be anything, but it's bad. So everybody who's available, come, right? And that goes out to all the surrounding departments, right? It's not just our department. and now we were working for the feds at the time too. So you're talking, it went over the federal radio, everything, right? So you got people coming from everywhere. One of the guys was coming so fast he hit a telephone pole, and because that's our, we go there to help, right? And the way we converge is like, in case there's somebody running away too, we're all converging on the scene. They're not going to get anywhere, right? It's like a noose tightening, So, and also too, when you call 1013, nobody's allowed to talk on a radio unless you have information, pertinent to that situation, right? If you don't have something to say about that, I don't care what your rank is, you don't say anything, So, but it's a madhouse, I know. So I get there and I just turn my weapon over to my chief because I know that I am out of the game now. I know that I'm getting, this is bad, it's a bad thing. So regardless if I did something wrong or did something wrong, it's irrelevant,
Right.
So I hand my weapon over to the chief, and the chief orders my sergeant to take me and Big Lenny to the hospital, right? So we jump in the car and we get to the hospital. The hospital story is a whole nother story because I laugh because so many funny things happen. So my sergeant takes us to the hospital, and we're walking into the emergency room and standing there. Well, I noticed there's this guy. He's in a really, really nice suit, like I'm really impressed with his, he looks sharp, So we walk and he says, "Hey, are you Gary Pacelli?" I'm like, "Who are you?" Because you understand it, like at this point, everybody is your enemy, you're paranoid because you could either be a hero, or you can go to jail for 20 years. And it has nothing to do with right or wrong. No, it's all about how it plays out.
Right.
It's all about the perception of what went on, and I already know that I'm behind the 8 ball because I know they're going to say unarmed, detective shoots unarmed man. Okay, he's armed with a 2,000-pound missile. You know what I mean? You don't need a gun to be armed, but the media, of course, right? So I know that it's going to be a long night, So, so I say to him, "Who are you?" He's like, "I'm your lawyer." I'm like, "Okay." He goes, "Give me your phone." Okay. He said, "You don't talk to anyone. All your calls go through me." He says, "You don't even talk to your doctors. I do all the talking." Okay. I said, "Who hired you?" He said, "Your union rep." So as soon as my partner called out 1013, my union rep picked up the phone and called the lawyer, right? So he says, "Okay, where's your wife?" I said, "She's home. She's pregnant. She's on bed rest." My son was like overdue at this point. You know what I mean? Like he was about to be born any minute, right? So he's like, "All right, well, we can't fly her here in a helicopter, obviously, because they were going to pick her up. So who can we send there?" I said, "All right, well, my other partner," because I had 2 partners at the time. My other partner, he lives around the corner. He's in Miami doing a job, right? So, Big Lenny's like, "I'll call her. We'll take care of it." So he took care of it. So but the lawyer says, whatever she does, she can't answer the phone. She can't watch TV, and don't answer the door, right? It's he's really I said, "Okay," and we tell her. She calls everyone, watches TV, and of course, there's like 9 people at my house, right? She opened, letting people in, whatever, right? And who wouldn't though, really? You know what I mean? Like, who's not going to do that, right? So I don't blame her. But it was on the news already. It was a big deal though, because Route 4 was closed for 6 hours, and that's like one of the major arteries into New York City. There were so many people mad you know, and I was like, oh man, they're gonna kill me. I'm gonna have to sneak out of here, you know. But it was like every half hour it's on the news. It's on the news. Oh man, it's building. And of course the story's wrong, you know, but you could just feel the tempo building, right? And in a hospital, and internal affairs comes. So I'm like, oh, ready? You know? And they're like, no, no, no. We're here. The sheriff ordered us here. We have to stand by your door. No one's allowed to talk to you. Okay, you know, and because the other county, Bergen County Homicide was there. They want a statement, right? They want me to give a statement already. That's not going to happen. My lawyer's not going to let that happen. They're fighting in the hallway. It's a big mess, you know, and you know, and I'm sitting there. We're watching the news. You know, it just keeps playing and playing, and I'm like, Lenny, we're screwed, you know. And Lenny's like, no, you're screwed. I'm like, all right, thanks, you know. So the nurse comes in, right, and now, me and Lenny are talking, just like, you know, we're talking right now. The nurse walks in, and all of a sudden he changes. And he's like, nurse, I can't breathe. I'm like, I'm looking at him. I'm like, he's like, you got to give me something. He's like, oh, okay, you're just really upset. I'll give you something. And he turns around and he says, and give him something too, because he hit his head. He doesn't know what he's talking about. I didn't say nothing. The nurse goes, oh, okay. She walks out. I said, what are you talking about? I'm not taking nothing. He's like, listen, you dummy. That's what he said. Right? He goes, if you take something, you can't give a statement. I'm like, oh, all right. Why don't you tell me that? Yeah. So the nurse comes in, she gives us something. I don't even know what it was. It's probably like sandwich or something. I have no idea. And so now we're like, all right, you know, I don't have to give a statement now, you know, which I know I have to give a statement, but it's just too early. I can't give it right. You know what I mean? Like, um, so it goes on and on and on. And I end up, and it's crazy the way it happened. The way it all went down was because it was building and building, and it was getting bad. I heard like Sharpton was coming. It was a big deal. You know what I mean? Like, and all of a sudden, breaking news right into the like newscast, right? Breaking news. Kobe Bryant was just charged with rape. Everybody starts clapping in the hallway, right? Because it erased me right off the news cycle. So it was just gone, right? And now nobody cared about it anymore, right? It's not like I didn't do anything wrong. But again, it doesn't matter, you know? And so I was like, oh man, I got lucky, you know? So I ended up, I got discharged from the hospital that night late, and I ended up going home, and it's like, I'm fine. You know what? There's nothing wrong with me. A week later, I couldn't even get out of bed. My body was all twisted up, and I ended up having 11 surgeries.
Oh my God.
From that. So they started operating on my shoulder, and they just kept messing it up. And they ended up doing like 6 operations. Then on the 7th one, it was so bad. It was pitted, and arthritis was in there. They had to replace the whole joint. And then they put two titanium cages in my lower spine. And then I had a wrist surgery. Then my they went back in, they thought it was infected, and then my deltoid muscle snapped, and it ended up balling up down here, right? Because what happened was all those surgeries, like probably very early on, they didn't move out the ball of my joint. So there was like probably a little edge sticking up. So every time I moved my arm, it acted like a saw. And then eventually it just gave, you know? So it was a mess. This took like 4.5 years of by the time I was done getting operated on, right? And you know, they gave me my medals, you know, it was like you know, oh yay, and then it's like the trap door and you're gone, you know. And you lose touch with everybody. Like, I mean, I'm still really close to my partners and stuff, you know, but you don't fit in anymore, you know. So you kind of like I censored myself. I kind of removed myself, because like I would meet everybody out, and after a little while I didn't fit in anymore, because I was a spectator. I wasn't a participant anymore, you know. So I felt funny, you know, and so and you can't get anything going, right? Like you're trying to work out. but every 4 to 6 months, you're getting operated on. You're getting out, I tried to go back to work at the academy a couple times, and I'd have to quit because I had another surgery coming up. So over that time period, I put on 100 pounds.
Oh,
And I was in great shape before I got hurt, which again is like why I didn't get as hurt as I should have, because I was in really, really good shape. So put on 100 pounds. I became depressed, but I didn't realize it. I didn't admit it. I was still in that, no, I'm fine, but I wasn't. It's just, my hole was getting deeper and deeper, and I would make excuses to myself like, well, everybody my age looks like this, like what a horrible, like that's just lame, you know what I mean? So, but it hit me really hard one day. I was looking at pictures of like my niece's graduation party, right? And there's a picture of me and my family, right? And I'm staring at this picture because I just, no matter how long I stare at it, I cannot recognize myself, you know? I don't know if you ever had something like that happen to you, but man, it felt like being hit in the chest with a sledgehammer, like, pow, like, but it woke me up, and I just said, no way, no, I'm done. I'm not doing this, you know? Um, I told the doctors, that's it, you're done. Nobody's touching me no more, because they'll never, ever stop. They'll just keep operating on everything, right? And I had enough. So it took me a couple of years, maybe like 2.5 years, but I lost weight. I got back in shape. I started doing intermittent fasting, and I was very strict. When I first started just juicing, I just wanted to lose the weight and just clean myself out, all the pain pills and all the crap, it was horrible. And, so you know what? I went from like just being unrecognizable, right, to like really good shape, like the best shape of my life. I was ripped, I had abs. I was I was really proud of myself, Um, but I was still missing something, like I was missing that, I don't know. It wasn't adrenaline. People say, well, you're an adrenaline junkie. No, it had nothing to do with that. It was everything, the camaraderie, right? I've always been on a team or a squad since I was 18 years old when I went to the Marine Corps. I went to the Marine Corps. I was infantry. So I'm my platoon, my squad. Then I was in the reserves. But when I started working in the police, same thing. The motorcycle squad. You always had your partner, right? And those guys that I started with in the jail, they followed me. We went together to the motorcycle squad, together, detective. Like these guys were family, man. Like there still are. Like we're brothers. You know what I mean? Like I like them more than I like my actual family. And, I was missing that, and it's like there's a hole in your heart, man. And it's bad. And you're like, how do you get that back? You can't go back in time, right? Um, so I was driving down a road by my house, right? And I always knew that it was there, but it never hit me. I'm driving down the road and, maybe like 15 minutes from where I live. And I look up and I'm like, oh man, skydivers, right? The parachutes, I see the parachutes. I'm like, oh yeah. I had done a skydive in 1988, right? When I had just got out of boot camp. And we went up in a little tiny Cessna, and I didn't even have to pull my parachute. It was a static line. All I had to do was let go of the wing, And as I fell, it pulled the parachute out, And steered the thing, it just goes boom, you hit the ground, you fall. It was the greatest thing in the world. And I said back then, I'm going to get my skydiving license. Life happens, you don't do it, and next thing I know, what, 30 years go by, 25 years go by. And I'm like, I'm doing it. Like I pull into the place and I walk in. I'm like, I want to get my skydiving license. They're like, whoa, slow down. You got to start out doing a tandem jump first. I'm like, all right, well, does this count? I showed them my logbook from way back in 1988. They're like, yeah, that counts as a jump, right? But you still have to do a tandem. I'm like, no problem. And like the tandem is like where the instructor hooks himself to you and you jump out. I was like, fine, just whatever we got to do, let's do it now. They're like, right now? I'm like, right now. So, next thing I know, I'm going up on a plane and bam, I'm like, jump, and again, it was the greatest thing in the world, like I couldn't wait to get home and tell my wife, and, and my wife wasn't mad, didn't, but she just was looking at me like almost like, are you crazy? Like, really? Like, she's like, I'm happy for you, and that's fantastic, but you said you were going to the store, so, you know what I mean? Like, and, but that was it, man. I just went for my license and I went every single day, waiting for the winds to be right, waiting for an instructor to show up. But it took me 3 weeks every single day. And I got my license at the end of October. And it was like kind of like the last point where, it was getting cold out, and so I got the license and I'm ready to go, the winter came and just started going. Like I think February of 2020. I had met a couple people while I was getting my license, and they one of them was an iron worker in New York City, so he wasn't working in the winter, so he's got like thousands of jumps, and we just went up and down the East Coast skydiving, right? And it was like a full-time job for me, right? Because what I was trying to accomplish was to become a tandem instructor, you needed 500 jumps, right? 500 jumps in 3 years. So I just figured I'll get all the jumps out of the way and we'll see, see if I can talk somebody to let me, not really knowing that there's no way they were gonna, you needed 3 years, but it didn't matter to me. I did over 300 jumps in that first year, which is a lot of jumps, I just,
That's
because it was
almost every
nonstop.
day.
Yeah, every chance I got. And, in the days that you can't jump, you're doing 7 jumps that day, just up, down, right? So, and I gotta give credit to my wife, my wife's a school teacher, 3rd grade, right? And, she'll tell you like, well, I wasn't happy about it, right? Like, it's not something that I wish he wasn't, right? But she'll also say that I was so much happier, and because I was alive again, I felt alive, right? And it was and I was meeting new people, and I was learning new things, really, because the whole community of skydiving, it's so different than the rest of the world, right? Like, everyone is welcome. It doesn't matter. And it's the greatest thing in the world, because like after a full day of skydiving, you're exhausted, but everybody, they light a big fire, everybody sits around a fire, and you talk about, skydiving, all, whatever, and everybody's just laughing, joking, having a great time. And, I took a step back and I looked around the fire pit one day, and, you got, active duty cop, right? Standing next to some guy with, a blue mohawk and, piercings all over. They're laughing, they're high-fiving. And next to them is like this special forces military guy talking to some, the mix is unbelievable. And you're like saying to yourself, wow, if you took the same group and put them like on a city street somewhere, they'd kill each other, right? But not when in skydiving, it's no, it was one of the greatest things I've ever seen, though, like, and it was just great. So, and that kind of like fits in where like, I was never like nervous or hesitant to just jump in my car and go to a skydiving place by myself. You know, I didn't really need anybody to be with me because I knew that I had instant friends wherever I went. I you know, and there's always those guys that you can't. They're just going to be jerks no matter what. But those guys they're the outcasts. So it's great. So that's why when I looked at the weather in 2021 and I said, wow. I said to my wife, I said, it's like the first weekend that spring is hitting in North Carolina. It's going to be beautiful. And there's this drop zone there that I really always wanted to check out. And I had begun wingsuiting, that's with the squirrel suit, where you fly, like a flying squirrel. It's probably one of the greatest things you could ever do because you're flying. I don't, I describe it in my speech. I say it that, I'm flying like a Hellfire missile locked in on its target, right? And about to explode. That's the way I can describe it, right? You're just all over the place, through clouds, up, down, around, it's great. And you're going so fast too, So I had begun wingsuiting, and I took the course and I had some jumps in and I was really excited about it. So I wanted to get a head start, for season coming up. This way I could fit in with the other wingsuiters and be able to, safely keep up with them, right? So I said, all right, I said, you mind if I go? She's like, no, go ahead, whatever, just be careful, okay? So I get down in North Carolina and I get there, it's a Monday morning, nobody is there. I'm the only fun jumper, right? So I'm not in the military, I'm not an instructor, so I'm considered to be a fun jumper, right? Because I jump for fun, right? So I could care less. It's a really nice place. The weather's beautiful. All right, so nobody's here today. I'm still going to hang out and check the place out, right? So I see a hangar. I open the door. I walk into the hangar. I drop my gear, and I just have that feeling that people are looking at me, right? And I turn around, and there's a bunch of guys like just staring at me, and I'm like, "Hey, how's it going?" Well, I come to find out this isn't the fun jumper hangar. This is the military hangar. Right? So, because this drop zone, we call them drop zones, right? The airport, right? And is right outside of Fort Bragg, right? So they had a plane contracted for them for training, So they must have been special forces guys, and on the side of their rigs it said SOC, which I think stood for Special Operations Command, right? So, it made sense to me. I didn't ask them what they did. I didn't really care. We just started talking, and I told them I was a retired detective, and that I was in the Marine Corps Reserves, and the whole 9 yards. And so we kind of hit it off, right? So they invited me. They said, "Hey, we got plenty of room. Do you want to jump on our plane?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Yeah, wow, yes. Now I wasn't jumping with them, I was doing my own thing, just hitching a ride on the plane, right? So, and what I was doing was, it's called tracking. I was practicing my wingsuit pattern, right? And there's different forms of skydiving, right? You fall straight down. So, some guys do all the crazy stuff, upside down, all that stuff. And there's something that's called tracking where you're like a lawn dart, right? If you put your body in the right position, it's like body surfing, right? So you can go pretty fast, pretty far. And I'm really good at it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to practice my pattern. So when I put my wingsuit on the next day, I'm not going to get lost, and then not be able to find my way back to the airport and the whole bit, right? So, okay. So I get out last, and I'm jumping all day with these guys. I did 6 jumps that day with them, right? And it was just a great day. And they were totally just great guys. So the next day I come and I show up, and I'm going to wingsuit this thing. There's other people now. There's other jumpers around, I'm nervous, I just got this feeling, man, something's wrong, I can't figure it out. I check my gear, recheck my gear. The wingsuit I had wasn't the suit that I normally used. It was a different suit. It was a rental, and it didn't fit right. It was too tight in my shoulders, and it was too tight in my arms, and it was too short, right? But I'm like, that's not it, like I can squeeze into the suit, you know, and I have a reserve parachute. So if anything happens, I'll just go to my reserve. It's not a big deal, right? But I can't figure out the source of what's going on, right? But I ignore it, you know, I push it down deep, Um, and then I started getting, so I got on a plane, right? So, you get on, I'm wingsuiting, so I'm getting out last, right? So you get on first. I get on first. Everybody else gets on a plane, and it's about 15 minutes till we get to like probably around 14,000 feet. It's like 2.5 miles up. So I'm fidgety, man. I'm uneasy, and started hearing the voice, right? Your inner voice, right? And some people call the voice, right, like your training, right? Or other people call it the universe, right? I call it God, right? And so and God's screaming at me right now, don't jump, ride the plane down, right? And the thing with the voice is, it doesn't matter what you call it, just don't ignore it. You know what I mean? Listen to the voice, right? I didn't, because of my pride, right? My arrogance, whatever it was. I didn't listen. I shoved it down deep, and I was like, no, I'm going. And the light turns, red. The jumper opens the door, then it turns green, and boom, he's out the door. Now, every 8 seconds, somebody's going out the door. Boom, 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 right? And I'm sliding down the bench, and I was jumping because I got this suit on, and everybody's gone. I get up, I get to the door, I check my airspace, it's all clear. I give it a little while, just to make sure everybody's out of my way. I'm out the door, and I launch right into my wingsuit flight, but the suit is too short, right? So it's making me fly at a steeper head down angle, which means I'm just going a lot faster, but it's okay. It's cool. I got it under control, right? And the jump's going great. I'm doing the same pattern I did the day before. The winds are the same. Everything's going perfect, and my altimeter, my helmet starts beeping, beep, 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 beep. And I had set it high, right? This way it'd give me enough time to slow down and whatever, deploy my parachute. So I'm at 6,500 feet, and I reach back and I pitch my canopy, and the second I do it, second I just let it go, I think you didn't slow down enough. And sure enough, my canopy, it hits the wind and it opens instantly, right? And all you hear, wow, it sounds like a gun firing, right? And my head snaps back, and it feels electrical charge go from my neck all the way out of my toes. And like as it does, my body goes limp, like just limp, and the only thing I move is my head, and I had a little movement in my left hand, right? And like my first thought is, no way, this isn't happening, right? So I think, all right, give it a few seconds. The feeling and movement it'll come back. Okay, it doesn't come back, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. Then I realized that at that moment, I'm gonna die. I did all the calculations in my head, like how fast my parachute is, So my parachute flies at like 27, 30 miles per hour, okay? With the wind at my back, add another 5 to 10 miles per hour, right? So I'm going to shortly hit the ground with a broken neck, between 30 and 40 miles per hour. There's no way that you can survive that. So I shouldn't have even survived breaking my neck. I'm a mile high now. There's no way. Like that's like the equivalent of hanging yourself a mile high in the sky, right? So, in my mind, I'm gonna die. And that was it. Like I didn't think past that, and you go through all the like the usual stuff, right? At first, I thought, well, your life flashes before your eyes. I thought about my wife, my kids, my dogs, right? there's nothing you can do. You can't move, right? So I hate to say this, but I initially accepted my fate, right? I accepted the fact that I'm going to die. So, okay, there's nothing I can do. And that doesn't last long. That did not last long at all. And all these thoughts, though, that you're having in your head, they happen really fast. You know, it's not like it's just dragged on. I mean, this is all like maybe 10 seconds, this all goes through your head. You know, after I gave up, like, I don't know what it's called, um, like a small flame, like inside your, inside, deep inside. It's like a tiny little birthday candle. I call it the fire of your soul, right? And it ignites. And, you know, so, because before that, the best way to describe like how I felt was like sad, right? Like just this deep soul crushing sadness, because, you know, you're going to die. And I thought about how the world would just keep turning, right? Except I wouldn't be here. Nothing would change. It's almost as if I was never here, right? And it instantly rips the ego right out of you. It doesn't matter. You could be the richest guy in the world, the toughest guy, or I always say like the best looking, right? And it doesn't matter because you're gonna die in 5 minutes. That's it. You have an appointment. You know what I mean? Like, and there's no way getting out of it, right? And so, I felt like that, like sadness, right? And because I felt small, right? Like a little speck of dust floating around. That's like because and when you feel like that, like things get put into perspective. Like I didn't realize it at that moment, but that changed my life, right? Because I realized how small and insignificant I really am in a big scheme, right? And all our big problems that we have and all our plans, that's all nonsense. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. Like you hear it, like just be good to people and enjoy your life and do the right thing. And it's very easy. It's a simple life. That's kind of what I got out of it at that moment, right? But anyway, it didn't matter. I knew I was going to die, and so. But I'm like, all right, I'm going to fight though. And now I'm going to fight because I can't just take this last ride. No, I'm in North Carolina, right? I'm a mile high. All I see is trees, and the lakes. I'm like, oh man. And I had this terrible, like fear of floating off and landing in like this forest, right? And getting hung up in a tree, but still alive, paralyzed, right? No one able to find you. And I'm thinking like the birds and the squirrels, they would peck at me, get inside my suit and like eat me alive, right? And I thought though, but the only comfort I had though was like, well, at least I'm not going to feel it, right? That's not very comforting. You know what I'm saying? So I had that going on. So I just said, you know what? I'm going to die, but I'm going to die fighting. I'm going to die fighting like a warrior with my sword in my hand. I'm not just going to go out on that, float away. No, you know, um, but what can I do though? I can't move. So once I thought about it though, I'm like, all right, well, you know what? I'm not in that bad a shape because um, I planned my parachute opening in a spot where the wind would be at my back. So it would carry me toward the drop zone, right? But if I did nothing, I would float right past it and end up in the trees. I was too high. I had to burn off the altitude. So I remember that I had learned how to steer my canopy using my body weight, right? And I could move my head, and I had that little movement in my hand, and I had that wingsuit on. So I was able, it acted as a sail almost, right? So I was able to make these wide 360-degree turns, right? And it seemed to be working. I was burning off the altitude. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to exactly land, but I knew that they had to have seen me. They had to be watching me. Someone was going to find me. And that's really all. I didn't think past that. I didn't, I knew I was going to die. Right. So, um, and the thing is too, though, right? Your mind, okay, it'll really, it could be your worst enemy. It'll, it can take you places that you don't want to go, at that moment, right? So the fact that I had to stay disciplined to make these turns was really good for me, because that's all I thought about really, and my altimeter set to beep at certain uh, altitudes because so you can start your landing pattern because we land like planes do. We have a landing pattern and we try to land into the wind, right? So my altimeter was set at 1,200, 600, and 300 feet, right? But the thing was though, like now each beep though was like, it was like a reminder of my impending doom. You know what I mean? It was like the countdown to, it's like, I can never probably explain what that felt like, So the first time it goes off, it's 3 beeps, right? 1,200 feet, beep, 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 1,200 feet. Okay. I look down, I'm crossing the runway. So I'm overshooting the landing zone and I'm heading straight for the trees, right? So I'm like, all right, well, no matter what I hit or how hard the impact, I know I'm not going to feel it. So I don't have to worry about that. But I'm still trying to do my thing, and then 2 beeps, 600 feet, right? And now, like, everything's getting bigger, it's noticeable, you know. Um, the ground is coming and I can't stop it, And it's like, and I think like, okay, it's coming. My dance with the Grim Reaper is about to begin here, My appointment is like right on schedule, it was 5 minutes from the time I broke my neck to where I'm going to hit the ground. And I just, at that moment though, like I'm thinking I'm going to hit the trees, right? Uh, and now I have the wind to my back, but I get hit with another breeze that actually turns me, right? And I don't know how it's doing it, and I don't care because it's turning me into the wind, which means it's going to slow me down, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. And I can see now where I'm going to land, and it's in somebody's backyard directly across the street from the drop zone, right? But there's a chain link fence. I can't lift my legs, right? And I'm like, oh man. So I realized at that moment though, and this is something like, and I don't know, maybe some of your listeners, I don't know what their beliefs are, but I'm not preaching, nothing like that. But this is, what I experienced, right? And so I see the fence and I know I can't lift my legs. And I just have this thought in my head that, wow, I really understand that saying now. Like, there's no atheists in a foxhole, right? You know what I mean? Because I'm really, like, here I go, this is it, right? So one beep, 300 feet, and I know that I have 30 seconds, 25 seconds to 30 seconds before I hit the ground. So, you know, I think and I say loudly, right in my mind, right? And this is not like me because I don't go to church. I don't, like I'm a guy that, that I always believed in God and I always just tried to do the right thing. That was all. It was very simple for me, right? And I say loudly, Jesus, please save me, right? And I don't know why I said it. And it just was something that came into my brain and I said it. And ow, I hit the fence just below my knees and it flips me over, smack into the ground, face down, right? And I have a really tinted visor already. And now I'm like face down into the ground. And so all I see is darkness, right? And everything's so silent, right? I don't hear anything. It's so quiet that it's loud, and I feel like really small, I know it sounds weird, but this is exactly how I felt. I felt really small. I remember, thinking to myself, am I dead? Right? Um, and I think like, I don't know. I really don't know if I'm dead or not. So then I got this thought in my head. Well, if I'm dead and I'm conscious, maybe I can move. So I try to move and I can't move. And I'm like, oh man, I'm alive. I wasn't supposed to live. Like I didn't want to live. My body felt like a coffin, right? And I was a prisoner locked inside of it. And I was like, I was disappointed because now I hadn't thought past that, you know. And now now I'm really in big trouble because now, oh, I'm a quadriplegic. I can't move my arms or legs. That's the definition of a quadriplegic. And I'm just like, I can't even imagine. Just the thought of not being able to move and just completely helpless, that like it was unbearable. And so it's like, um, but then I thought in my mind, I thought, man, I'm having a really bad morning. You know what I mean? Like, this is bad. Um, so what had happened now as I was making my turns at the lower altitudes, right? Military guys, they had jumped first and landed quickly, right? So they knew exactly where I was supposed to be from the day before, right? Because the winds were the same, nothing changed. And they noticed that I'm in total opposite side of where I was supposed to be. And they're like, something is not right. Um, so they looked up in binoculars and they saw that my arms were dangling, right? And so they knew I was in big trouble, right? So they jumped in a truck with a couple of staff members from the drop zone, right? And they followed me till I hit the ground. So they were there within a minute, right? And they, I want to try. I don't want to minimize like the role they played here because they were so trained. They took over they took over everything like that. They were in charge and nobody questioned them, right? Um, they stabilized me, right? And somehow they got me across the street to where the helicopter was going to pick me up, right? And they saved my life. There's no doubt that. All right, so maybe they didn't save my life, but I'm walking and moving my arms right now because of them, you know, because had somebody tried to move me that wasn't as trained as them, you know, I I would have been done, you know. Um, at one point, there's a lot of things that happened before I got on a helicopter. Like at one point, like I was very calm. I was very, very calm because, we learned something in the Marine Corps, right? And we laugh, we joke about it, right? We call it embracing the suck. I don't know if you ever heard that saying, okay?
Yeah.
And you know, I knew what it meant because of all the things that we've done, and when we're always in it, we always laugh, and it's just to make it. We're really good at making light of terrible situations we end up in, right? So, I always say like United States Marines really know how to thrive when things suck. So I was very, very calm because I knew I just had a life-changing event. There was nothing I could do about it at that moment anyway. So I wasn't going to whine about it. I wasn't going to make everybody who's trying to help me feel uncomfortable. Um, it kind of was what it was. And I tried to lighten the mood a little bit for myself, mostly because I didn't really want to think about, what, how things were going to progress, right? So I was kind of like laughing and joking a little bit, right? Um, they had to get my wallet, so they needed to know where my keys were and everything, right? So um, Now we have some really weird traditions in skydiving, right? So one of them is whenever you're caught doing something for the first time, right? You owe a case of beer, right? So you get fined, and you always get fined in beer, right? So the day before, I had sort of dropped zone manager, and I said, "Hey, listen, I had a great day today. I really enjoyed myself. You know, this is the first time I have ever been here. You know, thank you." He's like, "I got you. You know, you owe me a case of beer." I'm like, "Oh, you know." So I had bought the case of beer, you know, at the gas station on my way there. And as they're going to get my wallet out of my truck, I said, "Hey, listen, you know, get the case of beer out of the back of my truck and give it to Bob," right? And they stopped, they looked at me and they said, are you a maniac? Like, you don't even know if you're gonna live and you're worried about paying your beer fine. I'm like, "Yeah, but it's gonna go bad. So just take it out of the truck." They shake their head, you know. It's kind of funny when you look back at it, you know, but your mind wants to take you away from the situation you're in. You know, your mind does not want to think about like what's going on, right? And that's a good thing, I think, you know, because you don't really want to think about it. It's not going to help you, you know. So if they get me across the street to the helicopter, and those guys are all business, right? Like they're serious, you know. And so they're like strapping me on the you know, whatever you call it, I guess, the
Gurney.
stretcher that's going to get attached into the helicopter. And they're strapping me up. And I said to the flight paramedic, jokingly, I said, "Hey, when we get to altitude, can you throw me out the door?" You know? And he got mad, you know? He's on my watch, you know? And I was like, "Oh, okay." You know, listen, and I respect that. I do. I'm not making fun of him, but, you know, I felt no different than a sack of meat. You know what I mean? Like it was over for me, you know. Like I said, I just had this life-changing event. I can't do anything about it. I feel like a sack of meat. Um, I had no hope, right? And I don't know if you ever had been in that situation where you have no hope. Like to me, that's how I would describe hell, right? There's no hope. Like there's no way out. Like that's the way I was thinking. Like I there's no happy ending here, right? This doesn't end happy, you know? The first time I told the story, I said, "Yeah, we were running down the hallway," and then I caught myself. I said, I wasn't running anywhere, you know, like I couldn't move, right? So anyway, they're running down the hallway to get me in, and they got the portable X-ray machine. They're X-raying me. They're cutting off my clothes. They're putting IVs in me and everything, right? And I asked the one nurse who was like asking me questions. She was doing my intake, and I said, what's going on? Did something bad happen? You know?" And she looked at me and she smiled, right? And she says, "You, you happened." Right? So I thought to myself, I'm like, you know, like I'm in good hands, right? These people, they really care, you know, like they really care. I just couldn't figure out why. You know, what's the point? There's nothing you can do for me. I'm finished, you know? Like I felt like a monster, you know what I mean? Like it's almost like, man, just wheel me in a corner, man. Leave me alone, you know? And that's a bad attitude, but it's kind of like I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't understand the point, you know? So but they weren't having it though. Like they must have x-rayed me 4 or 5 times, right? They checked every inch of my body, and they couldn't understand how I didn't have any broken bones or not even a scratch. I didn't have a scratch on me except for my neck. You know, I blew out my neck, right? And they just couldn't, they just kept going up and down, right? They kept doing it. And so finally I get to the ICU, right? And you know, I managed to keep it together pretty, you know, pretty well, you know, because there's a lot going on. My mind's occupied, you know. And now here I am sitting there in the intensive care unit waiting for the doctor, right? And now I'm alone, right? And you just, you know, it all starts, right? I feel the guilt and the shame, right, of my accident, right? And because I feel really guilty, you know. Oh, I got to put my wife and family through this, right? You know, because It's another thing too, like as I was coming in, the voice again, right? I call this one like bad voice was in my ear saying, bitch it into the trees, get it over with. You know, even if you live, you're still paralyzed. That's not living. Like your wife and family, they don't deserve that. So this is what I got going on in my ear. And, you know, the voice was right, really, you know, that's because I didn't want to put my family through that. Right. So now here I am in the intensive care unit. And I'm like, oh man, you know, like this is bad. I can't do this. I can't do it, you know. And so, you know, like my mind became like this battlefield, right? It's going, you know, you know, I thought about life as a quadriplegic, right? And it's like my body is like my prison. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel small, locked inside my body, right? It's very hard to explain what it feels like. And you know, my thoughts, right, are just going. It's like, you know, again, I feel guilty, shame, you know, just you idiot, you know, why didn't you slow down enough? And it's on and on and on, you know, and I don't see any way out of here. There's like, I'm like, what, you know, what do I do? You know, like, how do you, I don't want to live like a quadriplegic. Number one, I don't know if I'm strong enough. I'm a strong person, right? But I don't know what, I don't know, you know, like that's tough. So I'm like, you know what? I gotta, I'm not embarrassed to talk about this because hopefully, you know, maybe it could help somebody. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, and I say like, you know, hey, like, you know, walk a mile in my shoes, right? You know, before you judge, just think about it, you know. So I had, you know, I had to try to find a way to kill myself, right? I just wanted out of here. I couldn't. So I can't move though. So what am I going to do? Like the nurse is not going to come in and overdose me. It's not going to happen, right?
Right.
So, you know, and your mind, like it goes into some crazy places, right? So you know, and what I'm about to say is going to sound ridiculous. I know, I understand that, but at that moment, it made perfect sense to me. You know what I mean? So I remember the movie I had seen years earlier called The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know if you saw that movie, right? And in the movie, the villain Hannibal Lecter, he convinces the maniac in the cell next to him to swallow his tongue and kill himself, right? So I'm thinking, well, I can move my tongue. I'm going to swallow my tongue. That's what I'm going to do. All right. So I start trying to swallow my tongue, and I'm doing this, and I'm trying. I mean, I'm really giving it a go at it, you know, for about 30 minutes, as hard as I can. And you know, I just realized then, you know, listen, I'm either doing it wrong, or maybe it's just impossible. You know, maybe it's just a made up thing in a movie, right? So the only thing I accomplished was to get like one of the few parts of my body that I could feel, my tongue, right? Now it actually hurts, right? Great. So now I got a tongue that hurts, right? I'm saying, you know what I mean? Like that's what, you know, come on. Because you know, your mind can launch you into greatness, right? Or it can drag you down to the lowest pit of hell if you let it, you know? So you
Amen.
gotta
Say that one more
somehow,
time, please. Say that one more time. Your mind
your
can.
mind can launch you into greatness, or it can drag you down to the lowest pit of hell, right? And you have to find a way to get control of it, you know. But at that time, I didn't have control of it, you know, with that feeling of dread and doom, right? And now the unknown, right? The unknown if I'll ever walk again, right? Um, it's pretty bad, you know, like it's like it's I would say this is like one of those things that I would consider almost worse than death, right? Because you just can't get your mind off of that. So I'm sitting here, so 4 days go by, right? And I'm still in the intensive care unit and living like this. But all I do when I'm conscious, because they got me drugged up, really, really, you know, serious stuff. So whenever I'm not asleep or hallucinating or whatever, uh, I'm trying to move something in my mind, at least, you know. I'm trying to concentrate on any kind of muscle group or anything, you know, just I'm like, I gotta move something, I gotta move something. And I think on the fourth day, I'm like, I think I'm moving my right big toe, you know, right? So I yell for the nurse, right? The nurse comes in. I'm like, hey, I think I'm moving my right big toe. So she looks and she says, I don't see it. So she rips off my sock and she grabs my toe, right? And she yells, I feel it, right? And she runs off down the hallway, right, to go get the doctor, right? And the doctor comes in and he doesn't say a word. He just grabs my toe, right? He's serious, you know. He grabs my toe. And I see this big smile on his face, right? Go from ear to ear. Right. He doesn't have to say anything, you know. So now over the next 2 days, I get a little bit of movement in my left big toe and then a little bit of movement in my right and left index fingers, right? So now the doctor comes in and now he commits a little more, right? He's like, okay, look, like I said, you know, everything I did was successful. Um, I still don't know what your recovery looks like. I don't know if you'll ever walk again. I told you that. I tell my patients it's all luck. He says, and the reason is because I've had very few patients that have walked out of here. Most don't. He says, I have no idea why. You know, he's like, you can't pick and say that one's going to walk out, that one's not going to walk out. You know, people I thought would never walk again walked out. You know, he said, so I have no idea why. He said, but if you stay positive and you do the hard work, whatever happens, the success or failure, it's up to you. And I was like, oh, you know, I'm thinking like, up to me, you know, like I'm 53 years old right now, you know, and I'm like, I honestly don't know if I have it in me, right? Everything was, you know, there's so many things like had I not tried to make it back close to the drop zone, by the time they found me, it would have been too late, you know? So just by getting back and then hitting the fence, you know, the wind turning me, you know, all these things, you know, the doctor, he's like, turns out to be one of the best doctors on the East Coast, right? You know, and he wasn't even supposed to be working that day. He just walked in and checked on a patient. And there I am coming off the helicopter. You know, because I had a little hope now, right? And a
Yeah.
little hope goes a long way, man. You know, like, you know, people have done great things with just a little bit of hope. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna stay positive. I'm walking out of here. That's it. You know, then the neurologist came in and she told me that she thought she was doing me a favor, but she told me I had a 1 in 5 million chance to walk out of the hospital, right? So I'm like, okay, well, at least I have a chance, right? Because she didn't say you have no chance, right? So since she didn't say I had no chance, she said I have a chance. Okay, I'm taking that chance then, you know, I'm going for it. And from that moment on, though, like I stayed positive and I wouldn't let anyone around me say anything different, you know? I mean, after months of hell, I walked out of there, you know?
Woo!
You know, I mean, there's ups, you know, there's downs, you know. Um, I remember one time they brought me in and we called my wife and she's crying. My dog just died, you know, and that was it. I wanted to quit again. You know what? I'm done. You know, hell with this. But I was like, you know what? No, no way. No, no. I used to be a police academy drill instructor, you know, and all those police recruits that I would torture to get them to realize that they can reach down deep inside and find the will to survive, right? And here I am about to quit. No, no way. I couldn't do it. You know, I'd be dishonoring myself. I'd be dishonoring them, you know, because dying is easy, right? But living is hard, right? You know, but it's worth it, you know. And then I realized that, you know, I've turned into a victim and a hypocrite. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. No way. So I went back to therapy. I told them, you know, I want more pain. I want more suffering. Because the quicker I took the pain and the suffering and put the work in, I could go home. But I could go home on my feet and not in that chair, you know? So, because I remembered who I was and I remembered who I was fighting for, right? So I walked out of there and, you know, I laughed. It was ugly, but I didn't forget. I don't care, you know, like to me, like, listen, every morning now I put my feet on the ground. I'm like, yeah, you know, because it's a victory, you know? So I got out of there and I had to skydive, right? People are like, well, why? Why? And the reason is because I cannot just walk away from skydiving and let my accident define me for the rest of my life. No way. I had to do it. But they were so against it. They wouldn't have it. There's no way they wouldn't do it. They thought I was crazy. They told me flat out, you're never jumping again. Don't even think about it, And, I was a little, that kind of pissed me off, but I didn't give up though. I'm like, but I see there's veterans. We have veterans here that are missing limbs and they skydive. They modify their gear, they train, and they do it. And it's so motivating, right? And I'm like, you guys won't let me skydive because I broke my neck? I understand the stigma. Everybody thinks I'm so fragile, right? But that's bull. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, okay, maybe I shouldn't. It doesn't, it's not a smart thing to do. I admit that, but it's not impossible, And I figured, I knew my friends were going to help me, right? No way, they wouldn't have it. I couldn't even find my skydiving gear. I didn't know where it was. They wouldn't tell me, right? So, I'm like, what am I, a high schooler that stayed out too late and you're taking my car keys away? Like that's so. Once I told her that, she stopped me. She's like, look, I have your skydiving gear and I'm fixing it, but I need more time because it's in such bad shape. They cut it off you. I'm like, oh, okay. So she says, look, if you get a doctor's note, I'll take you. I'll take you on a jump. Not a tandem jump, two solo jumpers, right? And I was like, okay, that's great. Now, my doctor in North Carolina, he says he was an awesome, what a great guy, He totally supported me going back to skydiving, And, when I left it with him, I asked him if I could skydive. He's like, yeah, just work hard enough to be able to skydive. That made sense to me, right? So, I put the work in. My doctors in New York, they were like, no way, absolutely not. Don't even ask again. I'm like, all right, whatever. So he gave me a note, the doctor in North Carolina. And I had it, and I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want anybody getting involved. Too many people get involved and it all falls apart. We got up there to altitude. It was a small plane too. And she opened the door and I swung my legs out. And I sat there like 2 miles up, my legs hanging out, And I swear, this is what dogs feel like when they stick their head out the window of the car. You know what I mean? Because that's what I felt like, man. I was so excited, fear never entered my mind. I was just excitement. It was total excitement. And I raised my hand, letting Shauna know that I was exiting. I just leaned forward and I fell out of the plane. And the wind hit me and it put me in a barrel roll and then a flip, and then I kind of relaxed and I got stable. I'm in a skydive position, and I turn right, I turn left. I don't see Shauna. I don't know where she is, I'm like, where could she be? She was above me, watching me, So she flies down, right? And we link up and we're, smiling, everything's great. This is a big deal. It really is a big deal. And so I signal to her that I'm getting ready to deploy my parachute, right? So she flies around on my side. She's gonna stay there in case my hands don't work, because I have very little feeling in my hands at that time, right? I still have a diminished feeling, but then it was really bad. So in case I couldn't grab my handle, you know what I mean? Like she'd be able to pull it for me, And she had modified my skydive equipment, where once my parachute opened, my handles would open. So I wouldn't have to finagle them with my fingers. I could just stick my hands in, so they were open, I did, and I pulled my toggles down. I had them. So so I reach back and boom, it opens up. Wow. Then I start spinning. Right? I have line twists, right? Because I was in such poor body position, right? My lines were all twisted up. Not a big deal, but I can't reach up high enough to finagle it because my shoulders are still locked up. So I either have to cut away, right, and go to my reserve, or I got a scissor kick as hard as I can right? To stop the spin and then like reverse the spin, and that will unwind the twist, right? So I do this, right? 30, 45 seconds. Oh, I got beautiful. I got a nice, perfect canopy above me. I'm at 4,000 feet. I'm ready. Like this is great, I reach down and I slide my leg straps down, which allows me to sit in my harness like a chair, right? Just like a chair. I got my little thing and I'm sitting. And I have time now, right? I have like probably 4 minutes, and I could think about everything that has happened to me, right? Everything. And it's all so crystal clear to me. Like every single thing that has ever happened to me in my entire life, good or bad, has has prepared me to survive and recover from this accident, right? It's just clear in my mind, right? That's, and I realized though that 5 months and 12 days earlier, I was lying in somebody's backyard in North Carolina, paralyzed, wishing I were dead. And now here I am skydiving, right? So I yell at the top of my lungs, I'm alive, right? And because I was so alive at that moment, right? It was the most alive I've ever been in my entire life. It felt unbelievable. And I landed, and I took it very cautious on that landing, but landed right where I wanted to, so I didn't lose my skill. And then, she says to me, she was crying, she was so excited, and my hand was shaking because my adrenaline was going, right? And because of my nerve damage, right? So I was like, whoa, and so she's like, all right, you're cleared. I'm clearing you to skydive. You can go, you can do whatever you want. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah. Get back on the plane, we go up again, and this time I come in and I stand my landing up, and boom, I stand it up. So, that's kind of it, man. And I haven't stopped. I've done 108 solo skydives since my accident, and
Shoo!
to me, it's a lot more now than just skydiving. To me, it's I want to show people that, look, I'm not looking for attention. That's not it. But we can do such incredible things. You know what I mean? Especially when we have no choice, right? But even, when people give up too easy, they just give up. I saw it in therapy. People just gave up. They just stopped. Like, well, what were you doing? You just stop. Come on. No, they're done, And I think that's what happens a lot. People get roadblocks and they that's it, and when really just push right through it, man. You know what I mean? Like, just don't let anybody decide your future for you. That's what I learned, but I'm good to people. Whether they deserve it or not, it doesn't matter to me, That's how I live my life now, right? And I stay consistent with it.
So, man, I cannot thank you enough for being so vulnerable and sharing so deeply and hopefully you certainly have encouraged me, encouraging our listeners that it's up to you. You make the decision. You just keep fighting. Thank you so much. And guys, please, if you want to get a hold of Gary, all of his information is below. If you want to hire him to do a speech or anything like that, he's incredibly inspirational. So just click on that link. So guys, if you have anything you need to say to Gary, please just write a comment here on YouTube and I'll let him know that it's there and he can respond to you. So Gary, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Me too.